me?
Yes.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Regine. I appreciate it. And thank you, Betsy. Let me know in the chat if you're at any point unable to hear me. Just a little bit of backstory for me. I'm actually up in Washington, D.C. for this summer doing an internship. I'm a UNC student, rising junior, and so I'm so grateful to be up here and be gaining all of the knowledge that I can and just learning so much from those around me. I'm interning with the U.S. Black Chambers of Commerce, who takes a look at the racial disparities that are present with us, especially when it comes to business in the United States. But I grew up and am a product of North Carolina's public schools. I spent time in Wake County, which is where the well is located. And I think it's so important that we do engage with young people. I was just in high school recently myself, and that's actually where I got my start being active. But I don't have a presentation ready to go like a PowerPoint because I'd love to interact with you all, like was mentioned in the chat, as well as through voice. I know we're going to have a question and answer session toward the end. But just quickly, I'm here tonight to really talk to you about habit one of those 7 habits, Stephen Covey's, of highly effective teens. And so I think that starting with that first habit of being proactive is so important. And how I understand that habit is really that being proactive is about taking responsibility for your life. I think that proactive people are responsible people, and young people specifically have a role to play in being proactive, and not always playing the blame game is how I see it, but being responsible for your behavior and for your actions. And so I think that so often young people, we are the future. And so we need to be taking measures that are proactive, which really means that we're not waiting for an outcome to become a reality, but instead we're taking advantage of the resources we have around us. We're being courageous, and we're using our voices to speak up and to really make a difference. And so with that, I'm going to just speak a little bit more about the habits and about how it has played a role in my life, and hopefully better explain it to you all. And then I will just briefly discuss what it means to be a social justice warrior or a social justice advocate, as we really look at what it means to be people that are committed to positive change in our communities, as the 7 habits outline. And so being proactive, to me, I use what I call the big 3, and that is education plus protesting or being strong and courageous and raising your voice, plus policy change, which is just written change. And even at the family level, we can use being proactive to drive conversations and have dialogue with our friends and family members. And so before I go any further, I just want to give you all my definition of social justice, because that's a term that folks throw around today so often and are hoping that young people are being engaged with social justice. But so often, people don't really know what that means. And so I like to think of social justice in this way. To me, social justice doesn't have to be a big.
Just 1 second, everybody. It sounds like you may be skipping.
We think about being proactive. It's so important that, with folks. Oh, I'm getting a message. Am I breaking up?
Greer, can you hear us?
I can hear you all. Sorry about that. Can y'all hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, I'm going to move to a place with better connection. Can y'all hear me and see me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, great. Let me go back a little bit. Thank you so much for that. And sorry about that, Carl, that I'll just go back a little bit. But really the main message is that something that I'm driven by and passionate for is social justice. And that overlaps so often in my experience with being proactive. because being proactive means speaking up. And for those of us that are youth on the call, and I was in middle and high school, like many of you not too long ago, I think it's helpful to give you my definition of social justice before we go further and then enter into the question and answer period. To me, social justice is that idea that all people are deserving of equal rights and opportunities for success for both themselves and their friends and their families. And often, social justice doesn't have to be a big act, but something small, like inviting someone you don't know to the lunch table when we get back in person, or even sticking up for someone in your community, down the street that's being bullied, especially for something that they can't control. And these are all examples of social justice too, because you are showing that you don't believe that anyone should be treated differently or negatively because they look or act or sound differently than you do. And so for the youth on the call, I think it's so important that we realize that we do have power. And the most important step in realizing that we have power, to me, is being proactive and taking that power and using it for positive change. And so I think that anyone can really be an advocate for positive change by utilizing those 7 habits of effective teenagers, because I believe that anyone can care about our young people and about working to make our communities safer and stronger and places where all people, especially young people, can thrive. And so I think, just going back quickly to habit number 1, I think that being proactive really revolves around being responsible for our own behavior. It revolves around making sure that we're able to not only make a difference, but that we know that the people around us can support us and help us, and that it's important to reach out. I think that it's also really important to understand that a lot of time change comes with uncertainty. And it can be tough when we're talking about social justice or some of these more broad terms that can really be hard to understand, or hard to understand where our role comes in. That's where being proactive and asking questions and leaning on people in our communities, leaning on resources like the Well and others, to really make sure that we're doing the best that we can to be positive change makers in our community. And it's important because I think a lot of times young people are overlooked or young people are ignored, but we actually have a lot of power and we have really good ideas when we work together. We know what's best for our future. And so by working with one another and really being able to have an open mind to stay proactive and then learn from one another is what's really most important when I think about the 7 habits. Actually, when I was in middle school and in Raleigh at Carroll Middle School, we actually said the 7 habits each day before we started class. And being proactive, of course, is number 1. And you can argue that they're all equally important. But understanding that young people especially are not a product of our circumstances, but we are a product of our decisions. And that's very key, is being able to understand that we all have backgrounds and different backgrounds. We all have the ability to make change and to really be people that are focused on speaking up for one another, but also understanding that we do have decisions to make and we have choices. And so to make the choice to be kind, to be a social justice warrior, to speak up for those that are being overlooked in our communities, or to make the choice to learn, to be willing to take on information that we may not know, because we know that education is really power. And then again, back to the big 3 that I mentioned at the top. I'm not sure if you all caught them, so I'll just say them again, but I live my life by the big 3, which are education and protest and policy change. And really what those mean, I'll just start briefly with education, is that it's important to learn. We can't really be proactive and make decisions that are going to be helpful or positive if we're not sure what we're talking about. And so having an open mind and being willing to learn from our teachers and our mentors, our coaches, those in our life that want to teach us and want to help us is so important. And then protesting, I know we've heard a lot about that in the recent years as we just look at the world around us, but it's important that we do find that courage. And I believe that anyone can really be a social justice warrior or can be active, an activist in their community, because all it takes is raising your voice when you witness something that you don't believe is right, and speaking up and making sure that you're using your voice to positively impact folks so that we can get ahead and provide solutions to some of the issues that we all face every day, instead of being so reactive and waiting until problems occur to then look to young people. And then that third is just policy change. And that doesn't have to be legislation or laws that are passed at the state level or at the congressional level, but just being willing to have your teachers and family members set a code of respect, a code of responsibility that everyone in your community, whether that's school or your team or your theater club, can live by, and understand that everyone's voice is valued, and that we all have different experiences that make a difference. Our diversity makes us strong, I like to say often. I'm seeing in the chat at school, especially when you're looking at middle school and high school, you can make a difference by speaking up and by challenging sometimes when people are being rude or disrespectful. I think that our diversity truly makes us strong as students. And that's why it's so important that we're constantly telling not only our friends and our family members, but our teachers and our faculty, our principals, how we feel. And I think it's very important to also understand when you're talking about being proactive and these 7 habits that someone came up with, to bring them down to a personal level. I am interested in majoring in political science, but the root word of politics, I think we can all learn from, and that's POL, poll. It just means people. And so if we live our lives really committed and dedicated to making sure that everyone has a fair chance at being happy and having fun, we can understand and turn that diversity really into our strength and really make a difference in each of our communities. If you look throughout the history books, as I'm sure some of you have learned, young people have always been on the front lines of change in the United States, right? Whether it's the civil rights movement or protesting gun violence, which I do often, or policing, or the environment, cleaning up after ourselves, young people have always made a difference. And sometimes we're not respected. Sometimes we are written off, but we've always been looked to when society is thinking about where we go next and how to move forward. And that's where being proactive really comes in. It's being future and forward thinkers, and it's being courageous. It's having the courage to speak up and let those around you know, especially your teachers and those at school and in your school community know that you have an opinion on something and that you want to be helpful, so that you can take advantage of the power that you have as young people and as students to really make a difference. I would love to stop there just so we have time. I've got all the time in the world, but I want to be respectful of your time so that I can hear questions from you all, or questions about the presentation, or about how I use the habit of being proactive, number one, in my life day to day. Thank you.
Yes. Thank you so much, Greer. So as Greer said, please utilize the chat, or if you have something that's just burning inside, you have to get it out. You can definitely unmute yourself and ask the question. I can get us started here. So of course, thank you so much, Greer, for your presentation, and specifically for tying into being proactive within your life and how you are serving your community. I see you, I follow you on all social media platforms because it really is inspiring to see someone with your age, with your energy, really just making such a difference and such a pivotal change and within the community and just serving others. So my first question is this: with being proactive, they talk about being proactive versus reactive language. How has changing your language impacted your life?
Sure. Thank you for that question. I think it's very important that, I say that language is so important, and the words that we use in being proactive are very important. I think you can tell the difference, especially young people and teenagers, when someone is being nice and respectful versus when they're being rude or trying to tear you down. And so when you think about language and communicating a message, and really tying that into being proactive, it's very, very important that in my day-to-day life as a college student, that we are understanding the place where those words are coming from. Exactly. I see that. I think Betsy just put tone in the chat. It's very important to understand where words are coming from and to understand each of our backgrounds. And so when you are proactive, whether that's at the lunch table, as I mentioned earlier, or in the classroom, or even in your community as you're engaging in sports or drama or singing or drawing, to understand that the words that you use do have an impact on people, and that words actually do hurt sometimes, and that is so important. I think we've all felt the sting when a harsh word has been thrown our way. And so when we're talking about getting active and raising our voices for change and being courageous enough to speak up when one of our friends is being taken advantage of, or something that we don't like is happening, using a respectful tone, and using words that are, again, going to allow us as students to be forward thinking people, and people that understand that we do have power and we want to use that power for good rather than weaponizing it for evil, is so key when we talk about language and the ways that Regine interacts with being proactive.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Yeah, you have a lot. Okay. You have a hallelujah choir here. I agree. Great points. Um, okay. So, my second question is this. In your opinion, what are 3 ways that teens can implement a can do attitude within their everyday lives?
I think that's a great question. Attitude is a big part of what I do, and having that, not only courage, as I've mentioned throughout the presentation, but also having the compassion to treat others not only the way that you want to be treated, but with respect and with dignity. And so to be proactive means to have a can-do attitude. Again, our choices are so important. The circumstances and backgrounds that we all find ourselves in are important, but for teenagers especially, our choices are very important. The decisions that we make could either help or hurt those around us. And so having a can-do attitude, to me, means having an attitude that lifts people up. It means having an attitude of boldness, to realize that your opinion and your voice does matter. And so being able to be proactive really reduces the chance that harmful effects or harmful decisions will be made. And that can really be hurtful for middle school and high schoolers. And so when you look at, and even college students, when you look at having a can-do attitude, simply it means understanding that you do have the power to see your decisions through. You can make a difference, whether that's organizing an event, whether that's being the team captain, or whether that's walking through the halls and being a student orientation leader in student government, in theater, which was a big part of my life in middle school and high school. To understand that you can be a leader in whatever space you find yourself is very important. And so I think that just monitoring the chat here as well, so I can get to as many questions. Sometimes being proactive is exhausting. And so having a can-do attitude is very important, that when you get tired or worn down, to understand that I can do this, that I have the ability within me to keep going, to see this decision through, to be kind and respectful, even when I don't feel like I'm at my best. That's what having a can-do attitude looks like for me. And that's what I try and think about in my daily life, as I'm not only going to class, but this summer doing an internship and having relationships with a lot of adults. Can y'all still hear me?
Yes.
Okay, awesome. So sorry about that. Just to wrap it up, I think that, having a can-do attitude, even when you are tired or exhausted or busy, is very important. And so I think that, as you continue to grow older, that your life is going to be filled with more and more responsibility. And so being able to have that passion and that fire and that drive to know that I want to work from a place of kindness, that I want to work from a place of rest instead of always being tired from the decisions that we make. That's what having a can-do attitude looks like for me.
And Joey says, I try to take a nap before I have a can do attitude. Love it. As we said, it's very tiring. So yeah, but when maybe you've had a day full of making a whole bunch of decisions. Yeah, definitely taking a nap could assist. Good self-care. Yeah, self-care is super important, Amelia says, and make sure to take care of yourself, definitely. So we talked about changing our language and we talk about a can-do attitude. And I appreciate definitely your answers for that. I want to get a little deeper. In what ways in your life have you turned setbacks into triumphs when considering habit number 1?
I think that's a great question. Again, just going back to that can-do attitude of, even when you are tired or frustrated, to be able to turn those setbacks into positive moments is key. Again, just looking at the chat, and feel free to continue typing notes in there. I get tired or exhausted or angry in the work that I do, both as a student and as an organizer. But I think it's so important that we do prioritize self-care. And again, that we're working or we're having our conversations with our family and friends and teachers from a place of rest instead of always being so tired and not making the best decisions. And so being proactive means to prioritize self-care. It means to make sure that you're working from the best place personally. And so I think for a lot of teenagers, that's hard because we get so busy. And I remember my life in high school was always go, 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 that resting was never top of my list. But I think it's so important when we talk about language and even when we talk about setbacks to include self-care in there. But to just quickly answer your question, Regine, about what it means to turn a setback into a triumph when you're talking about being proactive. For me, just in my life, I can think of many examples of when I had to go toe to toe with family members or even teachers as I was organizing against gun violence in high school. And we didn't see eye to eye on how maybe a decision should be carried out or what the next step would be or how to get a lot of students at an event. And so for me to think about being proactive meant to realize that the end goal was still the same, right? We still wanted to get to a place where we could help people, whether that was help people stay safe or give students at my high school the ability to get involved in different clubs. Even though we disagreed on the best way to get there, keeping in mind that we were all coming from a place, again, background, where we wanted to help those around us and help our peers was key. And so being proactive means taking the steps to be a good leader and to understand that decisions are not always going to be agreed upon. But if you can, at the end of the day, if you can be willing to have that conversation with people and to say, I think we're all coming from a place of compassion and from a place of belonging and wanting the other person to understand me. That's really where you can turn that into a triumph and continue this process. I think being proactive is definitely a routine. And so getting into the routine, as I'm sure you'll learn as we continue to go through the habits at the well, is key. So being proactive doesn't just mean making a good decision one time, but making a respectful decision that really includes the backgrounds and the life experiences of your peers over and over again.
So Betsy asks, is it easier or harder to be proactive at UNC compared to high school?
I think that's a great question. I would say it's about the same. I think it's been tough. We mentioned it before the call, before the Q&A kicked off, but this pandemic has been very tiring. And so to the person that said, taking a nap before engaging in a can-do attitude, that's very key. Or doing something, engaging in a hobby, right? That's fun for you or allows your mind to rest before going out and having an energy of positivity and a can-do attitude is key. So I would say at UNC, it's been tough this past year, especially because we were virtual, to have a can-do attitude and to be proactive. But I think it's so important that you surround yourself with people that support you and love you and offer you resources and the ability to learn. Like I said, I don't claim to know everything, and no one on this call knows it all, but to be of a proactive mindset means to be willing to always learn and always engage. And so I tried to have that mindset in high school as well as at UNC. And so I think it's been equally difficult, but equally rewarding to see those triumphs, both in high school, where I got my start being active and organizing folks after the Parkland school shooting, as well as in college, where I'm committed to making sure that all students at UNC Chapel Hill really have a voice. And so I think it's important that young people really lead those conversations and that we have the courage to say, not only we can do it, but we know we can do it because I know what it means to be proactive and I'm rested and I'm coming from a positive place.
Thank you so much. Beautiful answer. Well, if no one else has any more questions, my final question to you, what are some tidbits that you would like to leave for any teens or adults that are here to hear you speak about habit number one?
I would just say that it's important to listen. The first step in understanding anything is to listen. And so as we continue to talk about these habits of effective teens and think about what it means to be strong leaders in our communities, I've had to listen a lot more than I talk. And so I think for all of you here tonight, thank you so much for listening to me. And I think that again, that's the first step in being proactive. So you're already doing one of them. And like I said, I'm 20 years old now, but it wasn't long ago that I was in high school, that I was in middle school, that I was, engaging in fun activities with my friends and having tough conversations with my teachers and my family about how I could be the best student. And so I think that it's important that you are always willing to listen, and never be afraid to use your voice for good and to speak up when you have an idea on anything. I think to me, that's what it means to be proactive. It means to definitely recognize that you do have not only power, but that your life experiences and your life is necessary. And we deserve to hear from you and learn from you.
Thank you so much, Greer. And thank you everyone for coming today to hear Habit Number One by Greer Webb. We are so excited for this 7 Habits of Highly Effective Teens virtual series. It was such a fun time last year, but Greer is only the beginning. If you really enjoyed this, which I know that I did, this is just the beginning. And we have 2 weeks worth of learning, worth of challenging, worth of discussion. And we don't want you to miss any of them. So if you only signed up for just to hear Habit Number One, we ask that you go back on our website, www.wade.org, and go ahead and register for the remainder of the 7 Habits virtual sessions. We are so excited to do this again for this year. Thank you again for coming out, and we hope to see you on Tuesday where we talk about Habit Number Two, begin with the end in mind. Good night, everybody.